welcome to Sonic Talk number 376, recording this fine Wednesday, the 24th of September 2014. Welcome, one and all. I want to say, of course, if you're a regular listener to the show, you'll know that we're sponsored by Isotope, who indeed will be giving away one of their fabulous RX4 licenses. In fact, that started last week, so I've got a winner to announce this week too. So stay tuned, it could be you. That's that's somebody else's trademark, I'd imagine. I should probably be careful about saying that. Anyway, let's go back to our guests. I want to say, first of all, we also say thank you very much to our chat room. Got a nice full chat room this week. There we go. Even singing along with the intro tune. Isn't that marvellous? So we'll go back to our panels. We're with Dave Spears and Andy Shillito are looking a bit like a moody electronic duo there. I'm digging the shot. If you drop the contrast down even more, Dave, you could go for the real sort of, circa OMD, circa 1987 or something. I've only put one third up. Andy Shillito, you may know or may not. He's been a guest a couple of times on the show. He's basically a fairly high-level front house recording sound engineer, front house being live production. He does studio work and what have you. Just back off the road, I believe.
Yes, indeed. Courtney Love. 3 weeks in Australia with Courtney Love.
That sounds like a book right there.
Tiring book, yes.
I'm going to have to quiz you about this. We've also got Mr. Dave Spears from GeForceSoftware.com, who's right there. He's playing the kind of the Chris Lowe role in the electronic duo, perhaps. Is that the guy from Pet Shop Boys who you don't get to speak? Yeah, that's the shot there, right there. Moody electronic. I think that's going to be the poster frame. You've just sealed your fate. How are you, Dave?
I'm good, and you?
Yeah, good. Of course, last time we spoke to you, it was when last week we had Tara Busch on. Tara Busch, of course, did a gig on Sunday, which I know that Andy was involved in the sound for. And I've got a clip from that because Andy hot-footed it back and edited some stuff. Our Andy, not your Andy. So I'll play you a little clip and perhaps we can talk about that later. But on to the rest of our guests. Also got Mr. Gaz Williams, gazwilliams.me, professional bass player, producer, and co-host of Sonic Touch. The ever-popular Sonic Touch. In fact, episode 35 is live today, Gaz. I never heard back about whether there was a problem with any of the edits, so I just threw caution to the wind and I threw it up there. Exposed us for all to see. How are you, Get?
I do feel quite exposed with that episode, actually, because I don't think I told you at the time, but I'd been at a festival all weekend and was just ruined. I was ruined. And I thought somehow I could bluff it on the video, but I can't. I look as ruined as I felt.
Well, so, only you and your mother would know.
I've been dreading that episode coming out, actually, because of yes. But anyway,
we would have been none the wiser if you hadn't said it.
Oh. Whoops. No. Well, yeah.
Anyway, you should check it out. We cover the Focusrite iTrack dock, Keith McMillan's Soft Step 2, and also there's a sort of posthumous doesn't sound right, but rather late in coming gold award for Loopy HD, which is a fantastic thing to listen to. Loop Station, that's right. And Gaz performed, so you definitely ought to watch that. Anyway, we also have Mr. Richard Hilton, who's back briefly between huge disco festival performances where he plays keyboards with Chic, and also when he's not doing that, he's in the studio with Niall. So he's pretty much Niled out, I'd imagine, in life, who's and works constantly with him in a creative and musical situation. How are you, Richard? You well?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
Yes.
Where are you?
Actually, I wouldn't say constantly, because right now he's actually in London working on something with some other people. So he works with other people too. But I love working with him and have done so for a long time.
So where are you back from then? Have you been somewhere thrilling?
Yes, of course I was. Where was I?
Where was
I was in
Tuesday.
Milan, Italy. I was in Milan, Italy, where the food is unbelievable, and the audience was also unbelievable, and nice setting and great lighting, and it was a good show. We had fun. And before that, we played consecutive nights in Curacao and Ireland one weekend. That was, if you think about the distances involved, that was a pretty insane weekend. I mean, we've had quite a bit, of down and backs, and they've all been amazing. But the next one is not huge. It's at the Indigo 2 in London on the 9th of October.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. I'm not going to be in London that weekend, but I'm going up next weekend to see the very short-running Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which is it's a musical that's I can't remember the name of the guy now, the director. Anyway, he's done it. It's supposed to be very good. We managed to get some cheap tickets, so we're going to go up and enjoy that. But anyway, thank you very much for joining, everybody, one and all. And back to you, Andy and Dave. So first up. You're you're back from your tour, right? So that's front of house, and that's very sort of guitar. Was that the classic Courtney Love lineup? I was looking at some of her stuff earlier today, and she's definitely rocking it.
The recent stuff,
Yeah,
the Australian stuff. I've not worked with her before, and was obviously expecting Hull or members of, which it isn't. It's Ginger Wildheart from old Wildhearts fame. A guy called Miko Larkin on stage left playing guitar, who had a band called Larkin Love, who did fairly well. And the drummer is an American session drummer who plays for a band whose name have temporarily escaped me. But they're all kind of seasoned swapping band people, so it's kind of tightened. That side of it's tightened up a lot around her, from what I understand.
Okay.
She's worked hard at raising the game from old. There's obviously been this negative, which I wasn't aware of, this YouTube thing that went viral, which I could explain to some degree, actually, if you want. I mean, it's particularly unfair, that one, because her guitar's not in the mix. She doesn't intend to play guitar. She intends to look like she's playing guitar.
Oh, okay.
Is this the thing of just Courtney's voice in isolation?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Right,
yeah.
right.
I had a brief look at it the other day, because I was mixing some stuff from that tour, and spoke to the manager, and he said, "Have you seen that thing?" And I was like, "No." So I had a look. But it's, if she's actually quite a good guitar player. If she chose to play guitar, it would have been quite competent. The point is, it's not there for that. The other two guitar players do it. Hers is just a visual prop.
Right.
So it's misrepresentative, 50% misrepresented. Let's say.
Okay. Well, so technically, from a technical point of view, were there any specific challenges there? She doesn't sound like you're dealing with someone who's got a really whisper quiet voice and you've got to fight against a rock band and all that sort of stuff. So
no, quite the opposite. Apart from, occasionally the voice would give out. And then you would be fighting with it for a couple of days until she had a day off. But that's fairly common for a lot of people. There was no... I think the main challenge with that was she needs so much vocal on stage, and lots of people do, but she needed an incredible amount on stage, which meant that unless the gig's bigger than 2,000, I'm still getting some of that bottom end off her wedges. So that was a little bit of a challenge sometimes. But generally speaking, it was a very easy gig to mix.
Oh, that's interesting.
And a lot of fun.
That sounds like it. So, I'm guessing, once one reaches a certain time in one's career as an artist, you just don't party all the time. So it must have been a little less hectic than perhaps those whole days, I'd imagine.
It was a lot less hectic than that. There were people who shall be renamed unnamed in the band that still partied a little bit. But again, I think we spoke about this last time I was on. You don't see so much of that anymore. It's people have to have it together. Live is where they're making a lot of their money. And yeah, when they've been in the game that long, when she did talk about that briefly, as did, and I hope this doesn't sound like name dropping, but Chrissy Hind, who I did a couple of gigs for recently, spoke about the same thing. And they both sort of said, you just get bored after a while of being smashed and trying to do a gig smashed. So no, you don't really see much of it now. It's a much more professional outlook, I think.
I suppose it would have to be, yeah, like you say, because it's so much more riding on it that you can't really cock it up, because you've got a lot of stuff that does actually cause you, grief.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and this recent Courtney viral thing is a good example. Is you can have 10 amazing YouTube clips up and one really dreadful one, and that's the one people will feed around, and that's the one people would talk about. So people are more careful about doing bad shows now because of YouTube and the internet and Facebook and stuff, and the immediacy with which stuff can be put up.
I suppose that's a good thing, though. That kind of raises the game for everybody, and everybody then has, the clear winner is the punter, because they get to see a good show and they get to see someone committed to doing a good show. I suppose that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think. Yeah. I think it's interestingly tied to one of the subjects I think you're going to talk about later, which is the cross between the touchscreen desks and analog desks and how that's changed. I think there's a similar analogy type change going on all over the business.
Oh, that's interesting. I would like to talk more about that because as we've got you here and you're a rare attendee, it would seem to make sense. And one of the things that did come up, I just wanted to briefly come to this because obviously you were at South Bank and you were mixing the Tara Busch and Andy Mack, our resident video guy, my business partner, he came back today with the footage and cut this together so we can have a quick look and then perhaps you can we can recount some of the experiences. So here it comes. Oh no, that's not it. It's this one. Wait a minute. That was the audience. That was the audience, and this is the show.
I was so wrapped up in a gig, I didn't know there were that many people there.
That Oscar sounds fantastic. That Oscar sounds awesome. So that was a clip from, I'm guessing that was the longer form of the film. One of the things that I was going to ask you about, because Andy, you popped in and sort of got involved in the sound to that. I'm guessing, usually, when you're working with bands that are touring, they're not taking that kind of kit on the road. They're taking, samplers, they're taking representations. Did you notice a difference? Because usually, when you're dealing with a large sound system, you can really hear that extra bottom end and the sort of stuff that we go, oh yes, they're this much. But you would be best placed to kind of go, actually, yes, because that Oscar sounded absolutely monstrous when it came in. Did you find that you were kind of going, oh, these synths actually do sound quite a lot different to the usual stuff I get from a line out?
I did, but I was expecting that, having, years ago done things like the Sneaker Pimps, who had a lot of old... And I mean, Headswim that I used to have what was it, Dave? I was an SH1. An MS-20.
SH20.
Apparently. Yeah, that even. So I kind of... I did know about it. I expected it, and I recently worked with Alison Moyer, and that was all off, sound modules and samplers and laptops and Ableton and stuff. And funnily enough, I was sitting next to Chris, Dave's business partner, whilst watching the support band, who were running similar but simulated sounds, and they didn't sound analog through a big PA, but as soon as any of Dave's stuff was put up, it sounded massively different, much more pleasant to listen to. I think it's obviously like the vinyl CD MP3 thing, but it was massively noticeable between the support band setup and Tara's setup.
Oh, interesting. Dave, I noticed that you posted a photograph of you cleaning your ARP 2600, right? With a sort of rather OCD type obsessive caption, which I'm sure is not the case. I mean, how is it for you? Because they were your babies up there, and I know you were quite nervous about having the electronics sort of out in the world in a live scenario. Did it all work out okay? No damages?
No, amazing. I mean, I did. Yeah, I put a post up this morning saying that she'd looked after them really well. But it's a bit like a girlfriend who's kind of, gone off and had an affair. Now I've got the 2600 back. I'm quite prepared to take her back as long as she has a good wash. So it was that kind of mucking about that was going on this morning. No, it was, honestly, I was really quite blown away with it. I hadn't seen any of the rehearsals. We had very few discussions. I'd kind of helped her with a selection of synths, and then that had become refined over the time. What really impressed me was how she used each of those synthesizers for their inherent sonic character. So the Oscar was nasty, and the Pro 1 was fat, and the 101, which actually that could have gone at any time. There is a, this is this button issue
the mains
on
issue,
the power supply, and I had taken the SH2 up to swap it out. But she was so tightly rehearsed that actually the solution I came up with, which was basically use that sound for VCO1 and use the second sound for VCO2, and then when you finish the first song, drop that fader down and run the other fader up for VCO2, and then you're ready. She was so tightly rehearsed, she just said, I'll forget that. I'm going to take a chance with the 101. So really it only came, that was the only thing that was... that was the only thing I was slightly concerned about, that could suddenly drift. There was an issue with the support band where the speaker started crackling. That wasn't good. In fact, I spoke to the guy afterwards. He was great, actually, Cuts. And he said he didn't hear it, so he had a fantastic time on stage because his monitors were sounding good. But from an audience perspective, that was a complete distraction. And the Mark of a Pro quietly walks off, arranges for an entire new PA section to be put on in between the swap over. So when Tara went on, she was naturally concerned, but it took 2 seconds to allay her fears and go, that's all sorted, you're all ready to roll. So from my point of view, it was really awesome. And then it just got more awesome, because if you think that's powerful, when she starts using the 2600, both Chris and I looked at each other and went, we need a PA with a massive sub bass in a big room, because it just went, rah. It was like a throbbing thing. It was amazing, absolutely amazing.
That's interesting. Did you find you had to process it much, Andy, or did you just let it come out as it was and,
No, the way it works was that Tara did all the mixing on stage, and sorry, I just saw the delayed image of Dave doing something behind me. I thought he was doing it while I was talking. So she was sending me a stereo mix, basically, and then what I did to that was put a it was a digital desk, so I put a fairly posh compressor on it that would touch it when her vocal peaked, and would touch it on anything that was massively bassy, but it was only compressing about 2%. But because I'd never seen it before and I knew they were powerful instruments, powerful sounding instruments with a big range, and we just lost the PA once, I had to do something to protect that happening again without spoiling it. But you don't spoil it. People think sometimes that things need to be loud, and actually they work better when they're at the right volume, particularly bassy things. So I think whether it was the reason that the PA blew up during the support band was that it was a little bit too loud on some of the sounds or not, I think that engineer was running it too loud. We ran a lot quieter, but it sounded huger, and I think that was a combination of the instruments and working the room.
Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, I guess I would have been tempted to put a limiter on it just so that it didn't, you couldn't break anything. So just a little bit of compression would still live. I know, Rich, I saw you.
Well, that was kind of how I set the compressor up. It was just so it hit it, but hit it quickly.
And
then
I see what you mean.
I can see it then working, and if anything gets out of order, then I would just bring the ratio right up.
Right.
So it was effectively limiting. But you've got to kind of wait and see what happens to a certain degree. You take precautions, but don't squash things too much. Just be ready, which again comes in on our discussion later on with analog desks against digital desks.
Oh, that is very interesting. Yes,
it's much harder to set that kind of protective thing up on a digital desk and then work with it fast during the show.
Ah, interesting. I see you nodding there, Rich. I mean, I'm guessing with the Chic stuff, the kind of the way that it's played, everybody's very in touch with their instruments. You're not going to get massive spikes of sound because everybody's basically really professional and knows, how to use a microphone or how to play within the confines. They're not going to suddenly sort of dial in a sort of fully blown AC30 at kind of 25 dB louder than it ever was. So it must be an easier gig in terms of peaks, but a larger amount of sound sources, perhaps.
Perhaps. I'm not mixing, so I don't know, but I assume that Tara knows how to do all that too. So what I was nodding about was the effectively limiting comment that Andy made at the end, which is basically he's setting up the compressor as a final tipping point before the PA is going to be hit too hard, and it's really not intended to be like signal processing on the input so much as preventative. And it all makes total, complete sense. Andy, you and me got to work together sometime.
Excellent. Well, you never know. You might end up at the same festival somewhere, and it might just be like that. I think what we'll do now is I'm going to just bring in the isotope app, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about the whole thing, because we did have a discussion a few weeks ago about the PreSonus sort of rack mount mixers with the touchscreen front end, and I just wanted to explore that a little bit more with someone who is doing front of house sound a lot more. So we'll come back to that. But in the meantime, we'll just say thank you to our sponsors, Isotope, and of course, this is the next generation of industry standard. This is RX4. We've got a little piece that we recorded going through these things coming up in the next few days. It's an Emmy award-winning RX software. It's got so many professional tools for either post-production or recording, lots and lots of ways. Clip gain, you can easily adjust the balance and volume of vocals. You've got dialogue denoiser, which is now available on the RX4 and Advanced. RX Connect, which is really useful for taking workflow, say from Pro Tools, and just bringing it to and from RX as an editor. For audio professionals in post-production, music production and mastering, the advanced version boasts additional time-saving features as well, including a leveler, which is like an automatic automator, if that makes sense, EQ match, also ambience match, and there's many more features. So what you want to do is head over to Isotope /RX4, and you get, as with all their products, 10-day download unlimited demo, which is fantastic. So you can try it all out. You can do that for both advanced and the basic versions. So do check it out. And of course, if you've been following the show, you'll know that we've been giving it away. Or, well, I say us. I mean, Isotope would give away a copy of RX every week. And we have a winner for last week's show. I would like to congratulate Matthew Tanner, who has actually written a blog for us in the past. So it was nice to see his voice come up, his name come up in the random number generator. Matthew Tanner, I will contact you, and the Isotope Ferry will give you a copy of RX4. So congratulations, mate. So thank you very much for that. And we've also got another competition which we're going to run this week, and you need to basically be on Twitter. It's pretty easy to win Isotope RX4. You just have to tweet the hashtag EQ match. That's hashtag EQ match, because that's one of the features of RX4, to @SonicNick and @Isotope Inc. And what happens is we see a stream of tweets that come in, and we basically count up the number that there are, collect a random number, count up from the bottom, so from the first to arrive to last, and that's the one that wins. And it's the random number generator at random.org. So it's all transparent as you like. Anyway, once again, RX4, if you want to win that, hashtag EQ match @SonicNick and @Isotope Inc. So please do enter, and we thank Isotope for their continued sponsorship of the show. So yes, anyway, we're going back to the kind of notion of this idea of what's been happening in sort of the digital world. We've seen a massive revolution in terms of what's happening with digital, in terms of the DigiDesign desks, all the sort of front of house stuff, the footprints coming down, so much smaller, and also much smaller actual PA systems as well. And there's been also there seems there's further to go. Obviously, we saw the PreSonus system. I think I've got a clip of it here, not a clip, but you can see this is the AI PreSonus desk that basically gives you the opportunity to control either via touchscreen or a larger format touchscreen or iOS device, that sort of thing. I just want to come to you guys quickly, because I know you were really, really interested in the notion of mixing on touchscreen, and you were looking at the Line 6. I forget, was it Stage Source? I think it was called.
Mixscape or
Mixscape,
no, Mixscape.
Stagescape. Sounds one of those. It was a and so the idea of getting to stuff with hands-on touch, and you're obviously a co-host of Sonic Touch. Do you feel confident that you'd be able to be happy to work in that environment, and do you think it's going to take a little bit more time for you to kind of get into that notion?
It's interesting you saying that, because I have had various experiences since we were first discussing it, and with certain negative kind of experiences. So I've been put off it a little bit, but it's a tricky one. The idea of just being able to take the like something like an iPad, go front of house and be able just to move around and, mix in that way, I think is still very...
It's an attractive notion, isn't it?
It is. And I've also been working on a project recently where we were using Cubase IC, like the remote control, to mix on. But what was frustrating for me with that is it was just not enough control, and I couldn't resize the faders and various other things. So I just found it a little bit irritating and ended up not using it. Whereas the idea of it was really quite exciting, the actual practical implementation of it. When you hit against those things which act as a block, you just kind of go...
Back to my original choice. I refer you to my original decision, my lad. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, Andy, I mean, this is very much the thing, isn't it? The sort of promise of all this notion of a sort of new age. I mean, I'm guessing, you started out working on analog boards, right? And now presumably most of the places you go are digital. Do you get to specify what it is, or do you have to have the show prepared for various different desks? I mean, how does that work?
You have to cover all of those options as much as you possibly can. Because even if you spec a desk at a festival, it may blow up before you get them. Or you may get there and they may have been lying. When they said, yes, you can have that, we'll make sure there's one there when you arrive. So you have to have a broader catch net, really. I mean, that's one of the things, is that you have to, which relates to this sort of the way the analogy moves into like the work field as well. Back in the day, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you had to know one set of skills to run a mixing desk at a PA. You now need a whole other set of skills. And to get the best out of it, I mean, I'd be interested, what application was it being used in when you were using it? The PreSonus desk that we were talking about, was that a big gig, or were you stage mixing?
I wasn't mixing. It was the notion was this new range of products, which is and it's not just PreSonus, because we're seeing them with the Behringer rack mount. We're seeing them with all the iPad. The fact that we can control these complex DSP and mix environments with a touch surface, and the notion being that we would want to or feel comfortable doing that.
I had a discussion with an engineer the other day when we were on the Courtney tour, and I can, from where I work, the kind of things that I do, I can see that being very useful to a systems tech or a front of house engineer if you're playing in anything over 2,000 seaters, or if there's a balcony, it's easy then to walk upstairs and do something, make corrections while you're stood in that spot, as opposed to running up and downstairs and not being able to do it. In a smaller gig, your chances of being able to get it sound all right everywhere are fairly small. So as a front of house engineer, I would not think that was a useful application to be running during a show, particularly because it's on something like an iPad, and actually because it's touchscreen, because it's very easy to make a mistake.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, quite often when one rests your finger on a fader in anticipation of the move that you need to make in the at the end of the turnaround section, which the band may indeed decide to add another 4 bars to, or whatever it may be, and putting your finger on a touchscreen or hovering it above it is a scary prospect, particularly if there's that thing where sometimes you get very close and it just decides to read your finger anyway.
Yeah, I'd find that a bit scary. But in terms of the use that I was talking about, which is basically setting the systems up and having a walk around during the gig, that's actually been available to us on PA systems for quite a long time, because they have touchscreen linked systems. And at that level, I don't think you'd find them using an iPad. They have dedicated touchscreens that they can walk around with.
Right.
So that, the concept for it is very good and very strong, I think. But I think the concept for being able to do things like that on an iPhone is fairly flawed. But if you're talking about wedding gigs and stuff like that, I would think it's very useful.
That's interesting. Do you think, though, the pressures of, because touring brings pressures in it, I mean, I know, Rich, for instance, you have finessed your system to the point where you take the minimum amount of stuff, and your traveling footprint is such a major factor in making the whole thing work for you and for the wider organization and for the PA and for everybody, that those pressures will become harder to explain away, other than I don't like it, it might not work quite as well. I mean, do you see what I mean? See what I'm saying there?
You mean as relating?
Sorry,
I'm sorry. I thought you were
No,
directing
go
that
ahead,
to
Richard.
me.
Sorry. He did.
Were you directing that to me, Nick?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Then I'll answer it. You mean in terms of us using something like the PreSonus rig?
Or whatever, a touch, whatever it may be. It's not necessarily that, but something that would be the market pressures would mean that you would almost end up inevitably there.
Well, as I've mentioned in the past, when this subject in general came up, handing an iPad to each member of the band and letting them have a go is tantamount to giving people enough rope with which to hang themselves on some level. And having a well-trained, experienced, and responsive crew who you trust and know are going to deliver for you what your vision of what you're after is way better than that. I do see our front of house guy, who's wonderful, coming down front during sound checks and moving around a little bit, but generally speaking, he's not all over the room. And an experienced person can basically go upstairs, hear what they hear, go downstairs and make the correction. It's not something that's going to require 10 flights up and down to figure out. And so I pretty much agree with Andy right down the line. As to where it's best used and most creatively applied. And I also, even down to the fact that I don't trust my finger, as I've said so many times before, mixing on a coffee table is not something I ever really aspired to do.
Sure, I've got you. Do you think, Andy, that these things, I mean, because presumably there must have been some form of, there was probably resistance within the industry to the changeover from analog to digital, even though the benefits are just enormous. And presumably it's just as a result of the technology not being adequate to get the job done for comfortable, whereas now they're kind of everywhere. Now it's almost the opposite. It's almost unusual to see an analog console in a touring rig or a festival rig.
Yeah, it is very unusual unless somebody specs it. I know the Muse guy does. But, they're doing massive shows and he has an XL4 and he runs a lot of Pro Tools. And he also has a digital desk with him. But unless you've got that kind of luxury of budget.
Yeah.
And digital desks, you can store shows, you can do changeovers quickly. They're very useful and they're now very stable. And I think the major objections would have been from the older school engineers. And I know there were some, there were people who insisted that they had to have an XL4. A large amount of it was out of fear of not being able to deal with the new desks.
Yeah.
I think now most people are quite happy to use them. Now they've all been around, we all know. I mean, I don't know them inside out, but I can walk up to any digital desk and within 10 minutes, because they're all quite intuitive, I can make it do what I need it to do.
So that's it. So, Indra, do you find that you have to create the show on multiple desks? I mean, do you get that luxury in production rehearsals? Because usually you just wheel in whatever it is you're going to specify most of the time, right?
Well, if you're on a production rehearsal, the chances are you'd be taking that desk. And if you weren't taking it, you'd be speccing one the same everywhere. And often you will send the files so they'll be there. So again, it's not really if you're doing festivals, you're getting random gigs, and you're getting random desks. And as you build up more shows with an artist, you have more desk files for that artist.
I see. So after a festival or a gig there, you would say, "Can I take that with me? Because that's some work that I've done in the field on it." Right.
Yeah. No. You always get to take the file with you. It's your file. So yeah, I mean, for instance, the Darkness, I've got hundreds of files from different shows covering all types of desks. So I always have a start point.
That's interesting. So that makes it, in many ways, the more you do, the more of a background. I guess that what someone probably needs to do is write some kind of translator in the way that they have attempted to do across DAW documents in the past, but relatively unsuccessfully. It might be.
If I may add something.
Yes, go.
Sorry, Andy.
Go, Rich.
No, it's okay. Go.
All that said, about 15 months ago in Hyde Park, while we were on stage in front of like 100,000 people and on the Beeb in front of God knows how many more, 2 digital desks failed simultaneously.
Wow.
And at one point, they were sending audio from the monitor desk just so we could resume the show.
Wow.
With the front of house guy on an intercom with the monitor guy talking him through mixing. So, yes, they are very reliable most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. I think that's... Sorry, have you finished, Richard?
Yes, thank you.
But I think that's a great point, because if that had been an analog board would only ever work or not. You might lose a channel or two, and then in seconds you're in the back, you've moved it, it's done. If something goes wrong, you can follow a piece of cable to where, fault finding was a lot easier.
That's true.
Something goes wrong on a digital desk, it may be on a layer somewhere. Somebody may have just used the desk before you were at a festival, accidentally muted all the outputs on a layer that isn't on your file. Then you're really stuck. But if a digital desk does tend to go, it just goes. It doesn't half go. It either works or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And because they're so expensive, unless you're on a production tour and you've got another one ready next to it, what are you going to do? You know?
Well, and this may have related to things like firmware and having loaded our programs from other versions of this desk into that desk, as we do, because you show up and you load, you ask for the wiring to be a certain way so that you can load your show and have a nice basic starting point from which to then adjust to your current surroundings. And so this may have had to do with that sort of incompatibility, but that's the point. It's very...
how do
you don't always check every single software revision on every single console you walk up to. You don't know the last time they updated the firmware with this particular gear hire company in wherever you are in the world.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
It's not quite as straightforward as we'd like yet.
No, I suppose not. I guess it could have just been they put 2 mono jacks into what was stereo, and everything just went wrong, and it was very hard to trace. I know, Gaz. I mean, you're doing quite a lot of gigs where you're not taking a front of house guy. You rely pretty much on what you're given. Are you finding that there are any digital consoles in those kind of things, or are they still many out? Because I know, club owners are starting to look at them and go, this is interesting because it makes us more attractive as a venue, because it's this repeatability or whatever. I mean, there may be a number of reasons they would use to justify it, but are you finding that there are any in those sort of venues?
Behringer X32s are just popping up everywhere now. I mean, I'm seeing those at very small gigs as well, so that, I think that heralds a bit of a revolution in the digital desk market, the X32. I think it sort of brings a much bigger, what you'd have only really experienced maybe at higher levels into much kind of smaller situations. And I am seeing that regularly now, that desk, which I had to do a session with one the other day. So it was the first time I had to use one. And like Andy was saying, they are so much more intuitive these days. I remember using, I don't know, it was a Yamaha OV01V or something. Oh, it was one of those Yamaha ones a number of years ago, and it was all a little bit not sure. But like now, I don't know, they seem to have got that usability down real quick. So I was actually really impressed using that unit. There was something I did want to say on this subject, though, that relates to a tour I was on last year, where the artist, we were using a digital monitoring system, and the artist was, he could detect too much latency in his in-ear monitoring, and we had to swap out that for an analog system, and that was a real kind of new system as well. And I think the latency was probably ever so tiny, but because he was singing, it was just enough just to sort of unsettle him. So I was wondering if Andy's experienced tiny bits of latency, or if that is something that only the most sensitive of artists would notice.
Good point. Yeah.
I think I'm assuming it wasn't massive tour or a massive desk.
It was It was a big tour, but it was a kind of it was like a separate monitoring system that was.
That you took out with you.
Well, we ended up not taking it in the end. We ended up
Yeah.
using Midas Venice, I think, as the kind of for controlling the in-ears.
I would think the latency issues are to do with the sort of budget level of the desk. We don't experience them in £45,000 desks, Digicos, £100,000 desks. So I would think it's to do with the lower end of the market where people generally won't notice who are using things like that. I think that is, but that is an interesting thing because that's starting to happen now. Bands are turning up, support bands on tours are turning up with 4 sets of in-ears, a little tiny desk, and the band all do their own mixes. And it's actually more bother than it is to let the main monitor board do it. And you do get a lot of problems, But there are a lot of bands, especially the young bands, are buying these things so they can go out and have control of their monitors and stuff in that situation and save, the £40 a night they have to pay the systems guy to mix their monitors.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does come down to that side of thing, I mean, extra seats, or taking an extra person, the front of house guy, or whatever. I mean, that's the sort of notion of it, isn't it? There's a divide, isn't there? There's the big system, whichever way you look at it, the kind of effectively the larger the venue, the larger the entourage, the bigger the crew, that's still one more hotel room, that's still one more plane ticket, all of those things over a 20, 40, 50, 60 dates or whatever really start to add up, don't they? And that's how a lot of this stuff is innovated against those costs, and you just go, one less guy over a year, it's paid for itself twice.
Yeah, but I think if we're coming to the end of this, I think one of the things that I was thinking about this morning when I was considering this sort of thing is, you start with the divide of the engineers who will just go, I hate digital because they don't want to learn to use it. Whether these little desks or the new things that are happening are objectionable or not, I think it's just the way the world changes. And as I read in the article that was on a link that you or Dave sent me, it's about adapting, and it's about realizing that you have to expand your skills. And I think the same thing's happening with it. It's going to be, until the final changeover comes and everything's digital, it's going to be a sort of conglomeration of the two, where analog gets less and less percentage of that chunk. Yeah. And it finishes up as... But for instance, if the only digital desks had a minor bit of latency on them, I think eventually the culture or the musicians would learn to deal with a minor bit of latency. There isn't any going back. We're not. And I think that's the thing. It's the kind of, it's on all levels, it's the merging of the two things.
Right, I see what you're saying.
I don't think you can be resistant to the new technology because it's not good enough yet. You have to work with it and find out, report back to Roland or whoever made it, or Soundcraft. And that's kind of how these things are getting developed.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, these things, and obviously, as we expect, cheaper and cheaper technology, that's often the way. The users are almost the final stage of beta testing with the first round of these products, and that's just the way it ever is, really. I mean, it's not great, and sometimes it makes you very, very cross, but
it is great. Because
great.
Before they didn't care.
Okay. Well, that's a fair point.
And now they've learned that they don't know enough to know, so they go to people who do. And that is actually, as Andy said, progress. I mean, is it perfect? No, but
it's inevitable.
It's always
right.
Yeah, it's sort of, and this is actually probably the best you could hope for in a way, because they do now seem to care.
Yeah.
Well, okay. No, I take that point. That's a very valid one. I'm interested. We move this on a little bit because I don't know if you know, there's also this weekend or this week, there's a show on in Boston. Full disclosure, I'm actually on the advisory board of this show. I couldn't get to go this time. But it's a kind of to do with the advancement of audio applications, studio applications, electronic musical instruments, computer-based sort of DSP, all that kind of thing, combined with touch and just the way that the industry is moving. And there was a very interesting discussion yesterday at A3. This is A3E in Boston. If you go to A3exchange.com, you'll find details about it. It's on today as well. They're not streaming anything, but there was a piece on Tech Republic by excuse me, Erin Carson, who was there, and there was a panel with Stephen Slate and oh gosh, what's his name? The guy from Line 6, you know who he is. I forgot what his name is now.
Marcus Ryle.
Marcus Ryle, that's it. And also some guys from Blanda, all sorts of... and they're talking about the use of AI in music, artificial intelligence. I guess things that, where the computer kind of does the work. And I thought that was a kind of an interesting point. I mean, one of the things that I'm curious about is where can you think of those things happening? I know, Gaz, for instance, we've just shot some stuff on Cubase where Cubase can do automatic tempo detection and kind of very intelligently map live musicians to the grid. I thoroughly recommend you look at that when it comes out. Nearly finished the edit on that. But would you say that's sort of artificial intelligence working in tandem with standard music production or music, or would you say that's something different?
Well, I think it's there's some very clever work going on there. So so it has to use a form of artificial intelligence to be able to analyze and make some form of musical assessment. That we're talking about the Cubase tempo detection algorithm there. When I saw this article in the show notes, I was thinking very much along the lines of having artificial intelligence to act as a virtual engineer. This is something I've talked about before and something that I actually really want to happen soon. If I think about computer games, and the artificial intelligence has really been pushed by computer games. If you're going to be fighting a kind of some sort of soldier, then that soldier's got to think in a particular way.
Okay.
So the actual, so it's kind of pretty intelligent. The artificial intelligence, is pretty good. So I was kind of wondering, that if you could harness that kind of artificial intelligence into making a virtual engineer, someone who you could talk to using voice commands and get them to do loads of the tedious stuff. When I'm working with an engineer, on the rare occasions I get that opportunity rather than having to do it all myself, it's such a luxury, so to rather than have to do all this kind of boring bits, just to be able to issue a bunch of commands and for the artificial intelligence to do it. Now, whether it will get good enough to do that, we'll have to see. But, if we could just sort of say, for instance, I'm talking about maybe music production, and just say, okay, just mute all the tracks except for the kick drum and the bass guitar and, whatever, just issue basic commands and it just does all that for you. Like a real engineer could. I would find that personally really interesting. That's what
I suppose in many respects we're starting to get that way, because we can set up presets so easily and recall them at a button, and we can grouping and all of that sort of stuff does tend to happen. I suppose in terms of the auto mixing, that's interesting. There's the is it the Dan Duggan auto mixer? Dugan Auto Mixer, which I think a lot of people use for sort of presentations and panel discussions, such as this, where mics are intelligently muted, and and that's just it's like a gain matrix, I guess, a gating matrix or whatever. I'm not so sure. That's the sort of thing that is kind of useful. I mean, that started to be. I don't know if those whether. There has been some attempts to try and do that in a live music environment, isn't there, where you get the thing that's plugged on the vocal mic. It's not just mixing, it's actually once the vocalist stands on the spot, the mic is open. When they move away, it closes. Those are the sort of things. I mean, that sort of stuff is logically makes a certain amount of sense. And whether you could AI it up, as it were, I don't know. I mean, have you ever experienced that sort of stuff, Andy, in the field, or would you prefer just to kind of keep your hands on the buttons?
again, I think it's a combination of both. And I think what Gaz said about that sort of thing being attractive, certainly in the studio, I've been getting my teeth into Pro Tools for the first time for the last 12 months. And that is the one thing that really annoys me, is having to do those mute things and groups and safety this and safety that. And it's fiddly. It's easy on a physical desk, but it's fiddly when you first come to it. Although having said that, people did say when I first got Pro Tools, I was going to spend $5,000 getting the desk surface to run it with, because I didn't think I'd be able to relate to music correctly with a mouse. But I found, as everybody told me very quickly, that I did. And actually, in some respects, I like it.
Ah, okay.
Live proximity mats worked, which are literally a rubber mat, which is sensitive, and whenever you step off the mat, the vocal mic gets down. They're pretty useful if they're set up right. There was also an infrared thing, but that's not so good. That kind of fell by the wayside.
I guess with lighting systems, UV light and stuff, you might get into trouble.
No, so it was kind of infrared thing on the mic stand, so it would have a beam, and if you were stood in that beam, it would open up. They obviously didn't last long, obviously, because they're not with us anymore, really. You don't see them. But the idea was good. It was just too fragile a technology, I think.
Right. Okay.
So some automation, yeah. I mean, to that end, I suppose software gates and compressors are
Yeah, I suppose they
a
are.
form of artificial intelligence. It's whether you could ever actually get it to calculate something rather than rely on a massive bunch of presets.
I see what you mean.
With some kind of algorithm that says, if the bass guitar is at this level and it's got this much bottom end on it,
Do something else. Do this.
press
do that.
Yeah.
Which
Here's
is
a
kind
bunch
of what
choices.
we do when we're programming out sidechains and all that kind of stuff. It's sort of creating a large, complex sort of network of things that interact together. Dave, what about in sort of virtual instrument world? I mean, is AI coming up in the sort of stuff that you're developing, or things that you've seen? I mean, where do you see it having a place?
It's funny, because for me, artificial intelligence is a euphemism for a drummer after a couple of lines of Charlie. Ta-da! There's my joke of the week. And I can say that because I'm a drummer. No, I know a lot of people who are exploring this area, and I'm aware of a lot of difficulties. I can't really say too much, but there's a couple of really interesting people on this panel. Marcus Ryle, obviously, big hero, Line 6, Oberheim. But there's a guy, Dave Mash, who's on there from Berkeley. And he, I know, is immersed in this whole scene. And I'm seeing it in not necessarily a virtual instrument arena yet, but I am seeing it in a music compositional area. And I am quite cynical on that front, because I've experienced all sorts of stuff from Cohen Pro, this generative music stuff, which just, was kind of music to slash your wrist to, or fall asleep to, and all that kind of stuff. So at the minute, it's one of the, I come out with this phrase from time to time, and it's like, just don't talk about it, show me. And to a degree, with a lot of the people that I am dealing with when it comes to music composition, I'm like, it ain't there yet, show me when it is. It's very interesting, I have to say. It is really interesting, because the analytical side of your brain has to kind of understand how certain things function that are outside your remit in order to make choices, or make the machine make choices, or make the algorithm make decisions based on that. And that's it's a very interesting meeting of minds, and that's why this panel is very interesting.
I guess musical composition is an area that people are going to get defensive about, but in same way, why wouldn't they get defensive about, if you're an engineer or whatever, because if it's replaced. And one thing that did come up was Lander. I don't know if you've seen that. This is the kind of mastering thing that that has proprietary algorithms that you drop your stuff on, and you're allowed to, you process it, and it makes decisions based on the program material and puts them to you, and then you make the final choice. But it limits those, have a bit less, more, bit this, bit more that. So it simplifies it, but I'm guessing under the hood there's some AI stuff that's work. And I guess these are the sort of areas where we're going to see maybe faster development. I don't know. Rich, I mean, do you find that are there areas in what you do that you'd actually quite like to have some sort of AI involvement that kind of went, you know what, we haven't got an assistant, but it'd be great if that did that for me because it's a drag. And I just had to look over it at the end and go, yep, that's fine.
Well, as little as I know about AI to begin with and the possibilities, so far the ones we've discussed, the thing that interests me the most is predictive technologies within software that learns based on your usage habits across a period of time what things you're most likely to do and presents them to you in a menu that shows up like a favorites menu or something. So you don't have to go as deep into the architecture of, say, Logic or Pro Tools or what have you in order to make a change that you make all the time. And it goes beyond just assigning a quick key to it. It's just because you don't necessarily need that, and they've got 10 million of those already anyway. So that part where software is predicting my usage based on regular observation, that part interests me. But talking to my console doesn't interest me that much. And based on my experiences probably with Siri, my impression of voice recognition could use some improving, although I'm finding that Google is a lot more reliable for usage on that in the phone world. But I'm not sure I really want to talk to my console. I'm not sure I want my synthesizer to make decisions for me about whether or not I'd normally open the filter here or there. I don't really want anything that narrows the creative possibilities because it's added some automated thing, kind of like the way autocorrect in typing drives me nuts. I'm serious. It's a similar kind of analogy. Like, whereas creatively, if this thing in any way is going to paint a box around my possibilities, then I'm not that interested in it.
Yeah, that's a very...
and also there's a really good point here in that we don't, as creative individuals, we don't want things that agree with us all the time and temper to our needs. We want things that challenge us and make us think about different things. There's a really my last word on the subject is I am friendly with a guy who's one of the top 5 AI professors in the world, which basically, as much as I like this guy, it equates to a really simple thing. There are 5 people in the world that he can talk to at a party.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Is it an artificial party?
Yeah. That would be in, what's the name of that?
Second Life.
Second Life, yeah. Or
A
maybe
little bit
third
like
or
this
fourth.
party right here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I would say though, I mean, I've been having lots of fun with Siri on iOS lately. In that I'm getting it to do a whole bunch of things really accurately, but I have practiced it a little bit, and this is the point I was kind of going to make. And maybe this is me, and I'm not maybe representative of everybody, but when you sort of, like something like Siri, when you first start using it and it just doesn't really work. So straight away you become very cynical and go, oh, it's a load of rubbish, blah, blah, blah. But, I've kind of stuck with it a little bit, and now I can get it to do lots of stuff accurately, predictably and accurate. So that, that makes me think, ooh, it does actually quite excite me about the possibilities that, if you could just use that recognition and use that sort of voice control for stuff. So, I'm kind of more on the excited side of this, really, having had it now working for me, And as I say, it didn't work for me at first, and maybe the technology certainly has.
Well, it's supposed to
improved,
learn your voice print a little more as well. Oops, excuse me. Sorry about that. I seem to have... that's my
AI.
That my AI.
It's AI.
Well, I suppose the thing about AI, the notion about AI, is very much take your point. You're both Rich and you, and is the idea of it creating boundaries. And that's not what you want. If there's any AI stuff in there, you sort of want it to kind of come up with a possibility that you would just think, what? Oh, actually, yeah, there's something interesting going on there, but let me just, in the same way that if you're interacting with a human and they played, Gaz, you're in a band, you're playing, guitarist comes up with something really off the wall, but it sparks something else that takes you in another direction. That's the sort, I guess, creatively, perhaps that's the area it might work. I mean, it's quite scary that the notion of doing... the creating of musical backing tracks and stuff, that's really more about, it's less about what we do and it's more about what people who want to do what we do would like to do, and it makes it easier for them. It's an aspirational tool, which is, again, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you don't end up populating the kind of the notion of what music is that's all generated by AI algorithms, because that would be, I mean, we're not far away. I mean, we will end up there. You know, we've talked about this before with the whole sort of that whole phenomena in Japan, where it's the fake vocals, you know, the robotized vocals that are typed in and whatever. You know, that there is a precedent for that, you know, but it just hasn't kind of made it into maybe our domain just yet. But I think that's the thing with the developers as well. You need the developers to be sort of so much smarter than anybody else, so that whatever their boundaries are that they set up, they're going to be more interesting than what we've got, I suppose. Maybe that's the sort of notion.
And they also
Don't
need
know
to
about
listen.
that.
Sorry?
They also need to listen and learn from creative individuals. I think that's the really fascinating part for me.
Yeah.
It's marrying those two mindsets again. It's like, in order to make that happen, you need to understand all of this stuff over here.
Yeah. But yeah, no, sorry, Rich, you were going to come in. I mean, I don't want to see it in generative music, I must say. I don't really want it, or things that limit creativity myself.
Well, both the last two conversations have touched on the relationship between creative people and developers on some level. And it goes back to the mid-'80s when I was trying to get a job at New England Digital, and they thought what they needed was more coders, and I thought what they needed was musicians. And look where they ended up.
Whose advice did they take?
Their own. And actually, rather than hire me, they recommended me to Nile Rodgers, and we're here 26 and a half years later talking about it.
Ah, well, there we go. Living proof of something. Not entirely.
I'm not sure what. But there's always been that dichotomy, that relationship between the developer and what they see to be the user, but what we like to call in this conversation the creative people. Not that they're not creative, but just the people who actually use the stuff in the field all the time. And somehow the coders are never quite so sure how much input they want to take from the guys who actually use it, or whether or not they think they know better. And that relationship is always sort of like on a scale, the scales of justice thing, you know. It's not a fixed thing. Right now, I think we're in pretty good shape, as I said earlier, because they do seem to care.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I think also, as we've said, you know, the notion that we all have to develop multiple skills now to operate in, you know, even in the music field, you know, that more besides, even if we're specializing just in sound, you know, there are lots of things that we need. And those skills, obviously, people move between the disciplines, and coders become musicians and musicians become coders. And, you know, so there's a lot more cross.
Yeah, more so today than in 1985, admittedly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Or
true.
6 or whatever it was.
Fascinating stuff. I think, you know, it remains to be seen what AI can do. There's a headline there, isn't there? What did AI ever do for us? I mean, I'm sure there's probably, it's behind all the Google stuff, you know, that's based on AI algorithms and predictive sort of stuff that is learned from amassing knowledge. And I suppose, you know, the thing is those guys developing that stuff have input from, you know, however many billion people every day, every second, and they can extrapolate stuff from that. And they haven't got that right yet, so I'm not quite sure what that tells us in terms of how easy or difficult it is to get that right. Anyway, that's such an interesting place to start. I think actually I'm going to have to sign off shortly because purely because Kate Bush is playing tonight in Hammersmith, and my partner has gone to see her, so I have to get home and look after the child. But
Cool.
I think she'll be having fun because she managed to get a ticket, which is astonishing, really. Anybody else been to that gig? Andy, you haven't seen it? Dave?
No, I've heard great things about it though.
Yeah, it's supposed to be very good. Supposed to be very good indeed. So anyway, we'll say goodbye now. I want to say that, but first, before we go, remember you can win Isotope RX, as I always say, from our sponsors. I'll just fling that up again. All you have to do is tweet EQ Match, the hashtag EQ Match, to @SonicNick and @Isotope Inc. Oh, what's that Dave got there? Dave's sitting there with the Cynthia.
It's our band. It's our band pose. We're called the NUI.
Excellent. I like that. That's the Moody Electronic Duo. Andy,
Yeah.
you should be looking in the opposite direction though. You're not supposed to have any.
I couldn't.
Never
I'm not
mind.
concerned.
Anyway, thank you very much, guys. That's the one. Thank you very much for joining us. Great to have you aboard, and I'm sure you'll be off again shortly, Andy, because your skills are very much in demand, I'm sure.
I'll let you know who I'm out with next.
Thank you. And Dave, thank you for bringing us all together. Wheeling Andy in. I don't know what sort of coercion you used, but it worked, and he's remained. You can't see the chains on the floor or anything. So yeah, well done. Thank you very much, Dave Spears at GeForceSoftware.com. And also, I want to say thank you very much to Gaz Williams for joining us as well. GazWilliams.me. You will be seeing more of Gaz shortly. Like I said, we've got Sonic Touch episode 35 out there right now, and there's some Cubase specials that will be coming soon.
It's just like to say, if anyone's in Sheffield on Saturday, I'm playing at the Sensoria Festival with the Rumbelows, doing their live soundtrack again to the end of summer. Hit me up if you want a guestie.
Great. Thank you very much. You never know. We have people everywhere. And, of course, Mr. Rich Hilton, back home for a bit now, I guess. Is it quiet for a little while, or is it just endlessly diary filling?
Oh, there's things to do.
I'm sure.
Among them, hang on. Among them is to install this, which is
Universal Octo-Core. Is that is that a DSP? Is that a PCI or a Thunderbolt one?
This is a PCIe card. It better be. DSP accelerator card. DSP accelerator card. I have a quad card, which, as we all know, is facing some degree of obsolescence if I choose to upgrade my computer. So I've acquired this.
And that works in a chassis as well, is it? If needs be.
It will. I believe either of them will. I believe both of the cards will work in a chassis, and I'm about to find out as soon as I pull the quad card out of that 12 core and put this one in. I'm going to pop that one into a chassis and hopefully use it.
Excellent.
Here.
Well, Rich, I hope you enjoy many great hours together with your UA stuff. And thank you very much for joining us.
I like their stuff, but as you can see, I'm wearing Colin today because I love the man, and he makes brilliant stuff. Really
Mr.
great.
DSP.
I could live pretty much, other than a couple of things, I could live pretty much just in McDSP all day long and be very happy.
Excellent. Well, that's a phrase indeed. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next time. There will be a show next Wednesday, which is great. So I'm going to fade to black and see you later. Bye.